Hello, I'm Robin Vincent and welcome to Molten Modular. The purpose of today's video is just to sort of bring you up to date with where I am, what I'm thinking, where I'm going, what the heck do I think I'm doing? Because I find myself rather alarmingly in a position of Eurorack overflow. What do I mean? Well, I mean I've got these things here that I don't have any room for, and I seem to be bursting at the seams of my self-imposed limitation of a 3-row case. Well, of course, then what I should do is throw this out and get a much larger case, get one with 10 rows, or 12 rows, or 50 rows, just completely wallpaper my entire shed with more modules. Well, that is one way to go, but that's not really the way that I can go at the moment. So what I'm going to do is use this as an opportunity to examine my rack and see whether I actually need all the things that I have and have all the things that I need. Someone in the comments suggested that I should go back through everything and see whether there's anything that I would change now that I'm so much more knowledgeable and experienced in modular. And that's not a terrible idea. I mean, one thing that's certainly true is that I do now have a much better idea of what it is I'm trying to do. Or do I? No, do I? I think I may have a better idea of what it is I'm trying to do and trying to achieve, and actually how to achieve that. I mean, there's a number of modules that I bought initially because I kind of felt compelled to, or felt that it was a good place to start. And actually, if I had my time again, maybe I wouldn't have made the same choices. Or would I? You see, what is patently obvious, I mean, to you as a viewer, and increasingly to me, is that I still don't have any idea, really, what I'm talking about. I still spend my time on forums and Facebook groups reading other people's posts, wondering, what on earth is that all about? Frequently, that happens to me. In fact, if you see anywhere that I've posted in like a Eurorack Facebook group, it's usually because I'm suddenly grasped by the idea that I know what he's talking about, and I have to contribute in order to make it look as if I'm still part of this community and I really have something valuable to contribute. But anyway, we're all learning. Let's leave it at that. So in thinking about all of this, last night I had a go at playing with the modules I use the least. And that, funny enough, is sort of my top row, and that's what I was playing with at the beginning of this video. And as it turns out, it sounded pretty good. And so one of the things that I'm continuing to learn in this process is that some modules just take time. Sometimes you just have to sit down with a couple of modules and work with them together, and only then does their power and the interest and the glory of them start to emerge. I mean, I very much like to intuit my way through things. That's just the way I prefer to work. I like to get my hands onto something and just play and see what occurs. I'd never say I hate looking at manuals. I just would rather not have to look at a manual. I would rather discover things as I go along. But of course I do read manuals also. And thank you everyone who suggests that I should, because I do normally. I just don't always have the time. And so, last night I spent some time with clouds, which is one of the most unintuitive modules I've ever come across. I've spent a long time with it trying to coax some kind of sound out of it, and all I just kind of get is a mush, and a I mean, quite an ambient sounding, or ripples of noises and tones that don't seem to make any sense. I mean, that's my experience of clouds. I mean, I have now updated it with the Parasites firmware, and that gave me something else to play with. Or it forced me to look at it a little bit deeper and a little bit longer. That may pay dividends, I don't know. But last night playing with it, I did feel like I got a bit more to the bottom of it. I still don't love it, but I feel I got to the bottom of it. But is that enough to let it stay in my rack? Is it important enough to stay in my rack? Do I need it? Do I have it? Why do I have it? Is it because I'm into making weird ambient music? Well, yes, I am, but then this is not inspiring me. And so it's these sorts of processes that I'm going through at the moment. And every module has to declare its worth. It has to give me its usefulness in order to remain in this actually very small rack. The other problem, I suppose, is that I'm also using my rack to review modules that people send to me. And at the moment, I'm checking out the Vermona random rhythm, which is extremely interesting. I'm still fiddling with it. I'm only on a few pages into the manual so far, and I'm still trying to discover all of its little secrets, but it just makes some amazing rhythms that you can plug through the thing. But what I'm trying to say is that I need space to put those in. So, Erica Synths have kindly sent me the graphic VCO, but I have nowhere to put it, and that pains me deeply. And I'm looking at my rack going, well, I mean, I could replace that, or I could take this out, or I could take that out. But what is it that I need to take out? What can I lose? What should I lose? And what ultimately is going to replace it? What's the plan? Now, just a very quick note on reviews, because that's not a word that most of the sort of Eurorack YouTubers like to use. They prefer terms like overview or demonstration or walkthrough, all that kind of thing, as opposed to sharing an opinion. Whereas I come from kind of a school of thought, I suppose, because I've written reviews for magazines and I've done other things and reviews of other bits of gear. I always approach looking at a new module from a review perspective. And what I mean by that is that I am overflowing with opinion. That's kind of all I have, because I don't have a deep technical knowledge to tell you about the differences in waveforms, or to tell you accurately about how the quality of something sounds compared to something else, and to offer up scientific factual information. I don't really have that. All I have is the way something makes me feel. And so that's what I bring. So when I do a review of a product, I'm not trying to give it a score, marks out of 10 or stars or something like that. Because, ultimately, I find that pretty much all music technology gear is flipping awesome. It's all great. It's magical. The stuff we can do. The things that come out of here. It's just extraordinary. So I start a review from a position that it is already flipping awesome, but probably flawed. So awesome, but flawed. That tends to be what I look at. So I look at the awesomeness. I point that out. I explain how that makes me feel and how interesting or good it is to work with. And then I also point out which things that are not quite working well, or don't seem to connect with me, or could be improved upon, or perhaps are a huge, massive mistake. So that's the way I approach reviewing bits of gear. And often it takes a very long time. But as far as I can work out, you people out there in video land, you seem to appreciate that. And so I'm going to keep on doing it. That's what I'm going to keep on doing. And I don't ever claim to be right. I just want to share my experience with something. Good. So what I'll do then is I'll just run through my rack and tell you what it's all about at the moment. You will find this also on my modular grid page. I do keep an up-to-date one. And I think at the end of this video, I'm probably going to pull it all apart and put it back together again and see what it looks like, because I want to get these other things in. Right, starting up here then is my rarely used Z4000 envelope. Now, why is it rarely used? Why have I not been using it? Well, first of all, it's an ADSR, and I kind of discovered quite quickly that an ADSR is not really something that I need. An ADSR is really something with which you would evolve longer, larger sounds, pads, that kind of thing. And my rig isn't really set up for that sort of thing. So it feels like I'm not really using it. I tend to use envelopes in the maths, which is just attack and decay, rise and fall. And it's simple, and it's easy, and it's obvious, and it's a couple of twists, and it's away. Whereas with the Z4000, I've struggled to make proper use of it. And so I tend to ignore it. Probably the main reason for that is these two knobs here, the deviator and the attenuverter, because I don't really have any clue as to what they're supposed to be doing. Now, I might have gathered it because I was working with it last night, and I think I cracked it. It's something to do with, well, the attenuverter gives kind of the bigness of the envelope, so how, the amplitude of that envelope, I suppose. And the deviator seems to, it seemed to be letting signal through. It wasn't fully closing until I fiddled with that, and then it closed. Now, of course, I could read the manual and it would tell me all about it. That's ace, but I don't have it, I'm not looking at it right now. I'm just trying to intuit my way in. And I found that actually I know a little bit more of what that's talking about. And then I discovered that I can apply CV control to interesting things, which actually does get interesting. Let me demonstrate. I'm not going to demonstrate everything as we go through, although this is going to take hours, but just a couple of bits just to show, I think, what I'm learning along the way. Oh, I don't know. I'm just talking to a camera, so I'll just keep running on. So I'll turn this back up again. So, you know, attack, decay, sustain, don't do a whole lot, and then release. It's going to turn down the reverb from the clouds for the moment. So basically the attenuverter is the amplitude, so it increases in volume. So that goes back to the center. It's not actually doing anything at all. You need to push the amplitude of that up in order for it to move through its control of something. And then this deviator, if I turn it a bit to the right, it just lets everything through. It's as if the gate's not closing, if you see what I mean. Whereas I bring that back, there's a point at which it's now properly closing. Now it's being triggered by my Variegate 4 Plus down here, and also a sequence as well, but the triggering is only triggering 4 notes, so the gate is only opening 4 times, whereas there's 8 notes going through, I think. So if I increase the release so that the gate doesn't fully close, you'll start hearing those other notes in the background. So what I found, obviously, because these are all CV controllable, so I could, you know, add an LFO to that release and get it to move between letting everything through and then tighten itself back up again. Which is very interesting. So I think I've discovered a use for the Z4000, and that's now going to be incorporated a bit more. I mean, you know, I'm lazy and I cheat with the maths. I just want to do something really quick, and the maths really sorts that out. I don't often spend the time. I mean, that is something that last night really became clear to me, because more often than not, I treat this too casually. By which I mean I have it playing through my speakers over there on my other computer, and it kind of creates this sound in the shed, and I'm playing with stuff, but I'm never listening quite critically enough. I tend to just let it fill the place, and I fiddle around, and I wander off and do something else, and I come back and fiddle a bit more, you know, and have a lovely time doing so. But I'm not really concentrating and focusing on exactly what is going on. But last night I put headphones on, and that enabled me to really feel the difference, to really hear and kind of experience every single subtle change. I mean, that sounds ridiculous that I wouldn't be doing that all the time, but I just don't have the kind of brain that can focus intently on that sort of thing for that long. I have, yeah, I'm kind of a mass of stuff. I'm like something held in space, rotating kind of slowly. There's this cloud of stuff that I feel I'm dealing with and processing, and all these sorts of things at once. And so my music tends to exist within that space somehow. I don't think I'm explaining myself very well, but I don't think it matters. All I think I'm trying to say is that it's worthwhile spending, you know, headphoned, focused time on a couple of modules in order to discover what they're about. because ultimately I want to use my whole rig to create a piece of music live in performance, and then another piece of music, and then another. I want to be able to do that on the fly. But sometimes that's such a huge thing to try to achieve that you forget that essentially that kind of stuff is made up of tiny blocks, and perhaps spending time with those blocks will start to pay dividends as you can build things up. Oh no, I just like turning it all on and squishing it about and see what happens. Well, you know, either way can work. I'm just trying to unload a little bit on things that are knocking around in this revolving sphere of space-time and interface that's going around my head. So the next thing we find is the Moog Mother 32. There it is. This is the start of it all. This is the thing I began with. I bought it, I played with it, I used it live. It was instantly a lovely, warm, oh my God, this is a synthesizer type experience. It was fantastic. Didn't do a whole lot of patching, I have to say, but I just loved the knobs, the playfulness, the sound that came off it, and it just dropped into my live rig along with my Bass Station 2 and my circuit and my Surface Pro brilliantly. Perfect. No problems, no fuss. I am not in any way disappointed with the Mother 32. The question only is, should it be in my rack? Because it's huge, it's taken up all this space. I could have 1, 2, 3, 4, I could get 5 or 6, 7 or 8 modules in that space. I mean, okay, it's an entire voice and it has all these modules within itself, and maybe my mistake is that I'm not using the facilities of the Mother 32 enough in my rig. You know, I can get in there and use the filter. I can get in there and use the LFO. I can mix stuff through it. Maybe the flaw in all of my thinking is that I'm not using that enough and I need to get to know it better. Maybe, or I could just rip it out because it has its own case. I could put it back into its own case and have it sitting alongside. My only fear, my concern with that is then I'll sort of forget about it. A bit like I do with the O-Coast. I've got the No-Coast over here just out of shot, and it sits there and I leave it on because I like the lines. But I don't tend to patch it in. I just don't, because it's not there. It's not because I don't like it. I love it. But do you see what I mean? I'm just a mess. I'm a disaster. So the Mother 32 could come out and instantly solve my problem with the room that I have. And maybe that's inevitable. Maybe that's what I'm going to be doing. I don't know. I mean, I do have issues with the Mother 32, particularly in terms of the sequencer, in that I hate the sequencer. I do really not like the sequencer. One, because it's hard to program. I have, you know, every time I attempt to program it, I have to revert to the manual again and sort it out and work it out, and it slightly destroys your creativity when you're just trying to put something in and it's just too difficult. Now I know there's lots of people out there having a lovely time with it. That's fine, you go do that thing, but it's the one side of it that really I haven't warmed to. The other factor is that whenever I try to sync it to something, the timing is just completely bonkers. It never matches up with anything that I plug into it. You know, I plug the Variegate into the Turing machine and they're fine, they're synced. I plug it into the random rhythm and they're fine. They're all going at the same speed. I plug it into the Mother 32 and the Mother 32 goes crazy. So, you know, you just don't need that kind of hassle. But I should be using it more. This is the Eurorack conundrum, because you can never have a big enough case. You need more room and you don't ever want to get rid of anything because you might think you might just use it. Moving along then. Clouds. I've had clouds almost since the beginning. It was an early purchase. In fact, I purchased it as soon as I caught wind of the fact that it was going to be discontinued, because everyone said I should have a clouds. Everyone. Whoever I spoke to, they all said, oh yeah, get a clouds of the maths. Now the maths I did get, and I understand why, although I still only use it for the same two things. I understand that there's a lot more in there I could do with it, but as it is, it works really well. It's easy. I understand the elements that I need to use, so it's staying. I'd quite happily have one that was half the width, but still the same functionality, if you know what I mean. Clouds, on the other hand, nah. I mean, I took it to a jam night and I plugged it in and it made these noises, and it was like, oh, okay, I don't know. Everyone could say, hey, that's the clouds. And you go, yeah, it is. I really don't know what it's doing. I mean, let me turn this back up again. So I've got this running through, currently on the Oliver, which is the big reverb, the improved reverb. And that's all right. It's a reverb. But I've also got a reverb here in my Pico DSP. And that's all right too, you know. But of course the Clouds has got all this interesting things you can do with it. Like that, which I don't like. Don't like that either. But of course it has tons of other modes, like the original mode. Which is sort of interesting. I just don't know whether I like it. Is that useful? You know, playing with it last night, it's much more useful by itself. When you're trying to, you know, have it in a larger thing going on, I find it gets lost or mushy. You see, there's a danger now that I'm starting to enjoy it. As I've said, once you start to focus on something, it starts to reveal itself to you. So, you know, it's kind of a multi-effects unit, I suppose. It's got a reverb, it's got a delay, it's got a weird thing that creates kind of notes around what you're doing that's never seems to be in key with anything else that you're doing. And there was this new mode in Parasites called the Resonator, and I thought that might be really interesting. And I played with it and jammed in a load of LFO, and yeah, it was making weird noises. But it's better used with a percussive sound, and it sort of gives you these kind of chords. You see, I've never got that sound out of it before. Very intriguing. See, I don't know. You see, I just don't know anything. I was certain that I didn't like the Clouds, that I could not get into it and thought it was time to let it go. And now I'm thinking, oh, that's kind of nice. This is why this journey is a journey. It's a collection of little triumphs, little ideas, and then you just don't know anything. You spend some time in the wilderness, and then you come back and go, oh, this is fantastic. And then you go to something else, oh, this is terrible. I can't seem to create anything other than a beep today. Again, I talked about last night when I was having a little play. The idea was to create a quick video of me using the top row. But although all of it was interesting, none of it was really felt good enough. And as soon as I turned the video camera on, it just was never quite going right. Then, you know, turn it off and then, oh, it's fantastic. Put the video camera on, oh, it's just not. But that's such is my life with Eurorack, really. So moving on to the Polivoks filter then. Now the Polivoks filter from Eurorack Synths is one of the first modules that I got. I got it in my first collection because I knew that's exactly what I wanted. And it's good. It's good, but you need to work with it. It's not out of the box good. Out of the box you sort of do a sweep and you think, yeah, all right, that's okay. Let me just take some CV out of here. And it's an all right kind of sweep. It's just not exactly what I was expecting. I mean, it does this crazy thing at this end. Which I don't know that I like particularly. But what I've learnt with it is that it needs a good chunk of signal going in. It needs something interesting with which to filter, and then it gets more interesting. I mean, I've been really surprised at the difference I've found between filters, different ones that I've tried it out. Because I kind of assumed stupidly from a synthesizer point of view that they're all more or less the same. You know, as a filter, as a cutoff, whenever you go into a music shop, you could try 15 different synths and you get on the cutoff and it's, you know, it's a similar experience. But actually it's very different. And I only really realised that when I bought the Jove here, this one, because the Jove is much more like the sort of filter I expected all filters to be. Very musical, very playful, very squelchy, all those sorts of things. Whereas the Polivoks, not so much. But again, last night, as I was focusing in on this top row, it's really sort of come into its own, and I've enjoyed it tremendously, because it's, I mean, it's not supposed to be subtle, it's supposed to be a grainy, angry Polivoks filter, but my experience of it is that it's actually quite gentle. It doesn't have the sort of extremes that the Jove has. It doesn't seem to be flying around the place. It just seems to be, really sort of smooth and treacly. Subtle, even. Can I use that word with the Polivoks? I have no idea. So then, my top row, my abused and underused top row. What's the plan? I mean, what's the point of keeping something if I'm not going to use it? However, I'm now, of course, finding that I can use it. I am using it. I don't know. I'm going to see where I get to at the end of this video and see whether Clouds is in or out. I mean, the Mother 32, putting that back into its own box again is kind of a no-brainer. I imagine that's what's going to have to happen at this stage. The tip-top audio envelope, I think I'm going to use that a lot more, and I'm going to need to bring that back in somewhere because I don't think it's in the right place at the moment. Now, this happened the other day. I have a lightsaber over here, right? This is just as an aside. A Yoda lightsaber, and it turned itself on all by itself, which it has just done now. What is that about? It now won't turn off. Right, let's not get distracted by strange movements of the Force. Let's move on to my second row then. This contains all of the stuff that I use most often, I think. I mean, I know people arrange their racks in all sorts of different ways. They do it by manufacturer or by function. Me, I kind of just put stuff together that I like to use together. So at this end, the STO, the Make Noise STO, a perfect little oscillator, makes bleepy noises, really easy. I love the little sweep to the waveform that you can modulate and put in to bring in a little bit more grittiness. That's great. The black wavetable VCO, I'm still kind of investigating that. It's not as instantly satisfying, I find, as an analog oscillator. But in toying and playing with the wavetables a little bit, in adding some sort of subtle modulation to sweep the wavetables a little bit, certainly generates an interesting sound. And I'm sort of experimenting with that, using it as a bit more of a drone, and what else I can run it into. Of course, run it into clouds, you see. Running it into, oh, I don't know. But anyway, it's a good, chunky Erica Synths wavetable VCO. I should probably check out the new wavetables they've got for it at some point. But for the moment, I'm still playing with it, investigating it, and enjoying it. So that's completely fine. I've got no complaints of it. It's just that I haven't looked at it as deeply as I have some of my other oscillators. Mass, I've spoken about. I still only use it for envelopes. I mean, if I could have something half the size that just had a couple of AD cycling triggerable and CVable envelopes, then I'd be a happy person. But I mean, I keep seeing these little tutorials on Instagram pop up from Make Noise saying, oh, if you just plug this into this and this into this, then you can do this. And I look at them and go, what? Do what? What is it that... See, I don't really understand what it is that I'm trying to achieve with it. Now, I learned something the other day. No, see, I can't remember what that was. But suffice to say, I use it all the time, so it's not going anywhere. Next, Veil's a quad VCA, the most useful thing in my entire rack, and it's going to sit there in the middle. I probably need another one of those because I'm finding and I'm discovering that you can do more with VCAs than you probably initially thought. But of course, I have no more room for a VCA. I mean, often VCAs tend to be one in a single module, which doesn't seem anywhere near enough. I need another quad, as far as I can work out, in order to really nail the whole VCA thing, I think. Or do I? Because, I mean, what I've got down here that I haven't plugged in yet is a mixer or two. And those, although not VCAs, will do some of the stuff that I use VCAs for, which is purely just level control. And if I'm not actually using an envelope, then a mixer is probably more useful and certainly more economic in terms of space that it takes up. Next we have, possibly unexpectedly, is the Basimilus Iteritas Alter. Now, I've been talking about these for a long time, and I've only recently got into the idea of what they are all about. And then I saw a video by Malar Melodies, I think it was, where he had a go at one and just stuffed a load of stuff in it, and it was making the most extraordinary noise. And I just went, right, I have to have one. I mean, one of the main reasons was that I was looking for some other form of percussion. I mean, I've got a Pico drum, yeah, that's all right, a couple of drum sounds, great, but I wanted something more interesting in terms of percussion. And I know that you can turn all sorts of things into percussive stuff, as I did over here with just a little bit of envelope messing about. But I wanted something that's just going to sort out a bit more of a percussive backline thing going on. That seemed to be the fella. And it has brought me endless joy, I have to say. I mean, if I was to pick the one module which has been the most impressive, it's definitely the Basimilus. I don't know. The BIA from Noise Engineering. It's just fabulous. I don't yet know what all the knobs really do. I just know that when I plug stuff into it, shit happens, man. It just goes off. Can I give you an example of that? Maybe. Now, you know, initially when you plug it in, you go, oh, because what you're hearing is, let's turn it off a minute. Just that. And you start messing with a couple of things. You go, okay, there's a bit of a percussive sound. But that's not. What's that about? Okay, that is... Oh! Morph does something crazy. Got a spread thing. Oh, a pitch. Some harmonics. Bit of wave folding. Oh, wow. Then you've got these switches here which go from this to that. So, you know, initially on first look, you go, oh, I don't know, I've spent a load of money and I'm getting a kind of a douche out of it. But what you need to do and what you need to understand is you need to modulate it. Once you start modulating stuff, So yeah, no, I have no idea, no idea what I'm doing. All I know is that it's a whole load of fun, and you can sit there for ages just playing with it. I mean, I don't like the layout particularly. These knobs are a little bit fiddly to get in there with, and it tends to be stuffed full of cables, so which makes access even more difficult. But just to play, just to put stuff in, to modulate, to change that, to stick something else in, to use it pitched or unpitched, to sweep the pitch about or to leave the pitch hell alone. There doesn't seem to be any rules. There doesn't seem to be anything that governs exactly what it's going to do, and every time you play with it, it's a bit of a surprise. Sometimes it takes a couple of minutes just to warm yourself into it. Sometimes it's instantly extraordinary. And ultimately, you know, every time it's pretty exhausting because it can just overwhelm like nothing else. Flippin' magical, that is. Okay, moving on from there is my Batumi, my quadruple LFO, which continues to be used in absolutely everything that I do. I mean, my small-minded, narrow vision of what modulation is about is basically slow-moving LFOs. That tends to be where I'm stuck. Now, I'm sure there is lots more interesting things one can do with modulation, and that's something that I want to look into when I can find the time. But for the moment, it just moves around like this, and it goes through stuff, and it moves parameters, and I understand it, I know what's going on, and it's great. I mean, that's one thing about the mixers that I'm talking about. One of the reasons that I've got the hold of a mixer, in fact, 2 mixers, would you believe, is because I want to mix together some LFOs. I want to put a couple of things together to create more complex movement. That's one of the things I'm looking to do with these mixers. There are a couple of things that I feel that I'm missing in terms of modulation, and that's mainly to do with a bit more randomization, because in the Batumi you've got a nice sine wave, you've got a triangle wave, and you've got square. And that's kind of it. I really need something a bit more random. I really enjoy using the pulse output and the output from the Turing machine to do a bit of that. But something like a sample and hold circuit or some other randomizing LFO, I think would help me a great deal. Then moving to the Jove then, a filter from System 80. This was an impulse buy because I felt I was not getting everything I wanted out of the Polivoks filter. I felt there was another thing. And what happened was I was at a synth meet sitting next to a guy using a Jupiter 8, and the filter on that was exactly what I thought a filter should sound like. And I thought, well, that's what I'm after, that's what I need, what can I get? And it was kind of a toss-up between this, and there's also one by Studio Electronics, 8106, I think it is. I just really liked what System 80 were doing. I love what they're doing with that drum machine and other bits and pieces. The look I thought was awesome. So I gave it a punt, and it just rips a smile across your face. You just go, oh yeah, this is what filtering was supposed to be like. So I'm going to take the filter out of the ins and outs out of the Polivoks and jam it into the Jove, just to give you an example that I hope is useful. In fact, if I can take the same output that I'm using to pitch with the stimulus, I could probably plug that in to the Jove. Oh, let's take the reverb off for a second. See, that to me is chalk and cheese with the Polivoks. Very, very different. The Jove seems to be immensely musical. It's creative to play with. Whereas the Polivoks just seems to be a bit more utility. Yeah, it's doing what it's supposed to do. And that's great, and I have no intention of getting rid of it because it's a useful thing. But the Jove is far more exciting. It inspires. It makes you go, yeah, absolutely, and it draws you in and makes you want to put more stuff into it. Next, we have the Disting 4. That was a very useful purchase. I highly recommend the Disting 4 because it has a load of stuff in it that you never ever use, which is great. It's always fabulous to have a tiny little module in there that's reeking full of potential that you're never ever going to start playing with. I don't really mean that. All I mean is that I use it for one thing. I use it for quantizing. I use it for quantizing the Turing machine. The random voltages from the Turing machine go into here and get squashed into some kind of key, musical key, which you can dial up on these numbers here. It works, it's simple, but it's not particularly intuitive. It's not something that you can play with very easily. It's just doing the job, and that's what the Disting 4 is really good at. It's doing the job of something that you don't otherwise have in your rack. Which brings me to the whole subject of quantizers. I feel overwhelmingly, quite strongly, that I need a quantizer, but I cannot decide which one I need. Because I need something to quantize the Turing. I mean, is that all I need it for, or do I need it for other things? I don't know. Suffice to say, I love what the Turing creates. It just needs to be quantized. And if I can use it in a key or a way that's easily changeable, then that I think is going to benefit me greatly, particularly in live performance. So I have seen lots of different quantizers that have little keyboards with buttons on with notes that you light up. And that seems perfect. There's the one called the Penrose, which is very, very simple, and it's in kit form and nice and cheap, which just has this keyboard that you light up the notes and then it sticks to the notes. That is very, very attractive. But then there's also that tip-top one that's got the slider on that makes it really easy to change keys and transpose. And then there's a couple of others that are far more complex and could do lots of additional interesting things. And then, of course, the Intruso Harmonag, which looks phenomenal, although that's kind of geared a bit more towards polyphonic play. So I don't know. And what I was going to ask was to throw this out to the community out there. What do you think? What sort of quantizer should I get? I don't want anything that's going to be huge or overly complex, but, you know, features are features and can be interesting. So starting with the possibility of the Penrose and going, you know, as big as you like, I would just be really interested in recommendations on what would work well with the Turing, what would sit well in your system, what's easy to play with, and, you know, share your experiences. Tell me what you think is good, and I will consider all those. And then the Disting can become something else. It has lots and lots of things it could be. Next, I've got a little drum department over here. I've got the Pico drums, which gives you 2 sounds, which is fine. They're samples. They're not fabulous, but they're all right. And it forms a bedrock of something or other. My biggest criticism of the Pico drums is that it doesn't retain your last selection. So it always starts off with both drums being a kick drum and not a good one. I always prefer that one. And then the second drum I prefer to be a bit of a clap. But I've got to find that. There we go. And then alongside that, I bought a hat from 2HP. Because I was reviewing the Random Rhythm, I knew I needed a few more drum sounds. And a hi-hat, I thought, perfect. 2HP, it can fit in there, it gives me a closed and open hi-hat. Fabulous. What could be better than that? So I jammed that in there as well. And what you get very simply is a closed hi-hat and then an open one. Now I know you can get big fat wide modules for percussion, you know, one module per thing, but I just don't have the room for that. So the 2 HP one, which gives me 2 slightly different percussive sounds which are related to each other, it just makes complete sense in terms of, you know, economy of Eurorack and the noises that it's making and its usefulness within something. Yeah, super, love it. Perfect. Thank you very much. So that's row number 2. Now the bottom row is a little bit more, I don't know what's quite going on down here, because this is the place where I put in the things that I'm reviewing. So I need room in there for new stuff, and it's also where my sequencer is, which is always hidden under this nest of cables, and it's where my output lives. But just to go from left to right, I've got the Demora. Now I bought the Roland Demora many moons ago because it has the facility to be a USB audio interface, a DC coupled USB audio interface. And so I was able to use it in the videos I made about bitwig and control voltage and all that sort of malarkey. And so it was very, very useful for that. As a delay, I kind of find it slightly overcomplicated, and it takes up a lot of room just to give me a bit of delay. I mean, that's what I'm using it for at the moment, and I love delay. I have to have a delay in there. But the Demora as such is not really earning its space. And I think there's things which are smaller which would do just as well. Or there are things which are of a similar HP which are going to give me a whole lot more. I mean, I'm mainly talking about the Strymon Magneto. That's a fabulous box. I mean, I was totally blown away by it when I saw it in the videos at NAMM, and when they, you know, announced it. It's fantastic. I mean, I know people use a lot of Strymon stomp boxes along with their Eurorack. I mean, the Big Sky one and the El Capitan, and essentially the Magneto is taking elements of that and put it in just this amazing sounding Eurorack module. Now, I might have put one on order through Red Dog Music. My friends at Red Dog Music are going to try to source me one. And so I hope to have that as my main creative delay. And so I don't think I'm going to be keeping the Demora. I think that needs to come out. Although, again, it can run by itself. It does have its own little bottom, a box and a power supply. So I could sort of run it alongside the rack until I've got something to replace it. For instance, the Distinct 4 can also be a delay. Maybe that's worthwhile. My Pico DSP down here can also be a delay. So maybe I've got enough delay until I get something extraordinary like the Magneto to play with. So the Demora probably is going to lose out to this round of culling, I think. Next, the Round of Rhythm. That's going to be my next review. I'm working on it at the moment, thoroughly enjoying it, not fully understanding it, but that's my way. You know, that's my way. But I think I'm going to be able to unravel it and unpack it for you, because it has some amazing little things in there. I mean, is that amazing? I don't know. I mean, you just... it's just a load of fun. A load of fun. Next to that, currently not plugged into anything, is the Ericasynths Black VCO that I did a big review of. And it remains awesome, and it remains my go-to oscillator. At the moment, everything, the sound of the oscillator in this system is coming out of the Mother 32, because I was playing with the top row. But this is the one that I would normally start with in order to form, you know, a bass line or something else going on. I always start with a Black VCO. It's fabulous. Alongside that is the Turing machine, which I love and I use daily to create tunes and melodies and stuff that just goes on. It's brilliant for the pitch information that it creates. It's brilliant for the pulse that comes out as well to use as a gate. Fantastic. Love it. Next to that is the Varigate 4 Plus. Now, this has not been anywhere near as intuitive as I thought it might be. However, I use it all the time. It's intuitive enough for me to grasp that out of channel 1, I got a bunch of notes. Out of channel 2, I got a bunch of gates. Out of channel 3, a bunch more notes. Out of channel 4, a bunch of gates. And I'm slowly understanding the differences between dividing and multiplying, between changing the length, the sequencer mode, the pulse width, the scale, and the tempos. It has elements of frustration in it because, I mean, I'll tell you why. I mean, I'm going to do a full review of this because it's fantastic and I want to tell people about it. But there's one thing that frustrates me because I made assumptions about it. I assumed that using this as a sequencer, I would be able to visually see the notes as they go down. You know, boom, 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 boom. That I would set the notes and I would see them because that's helpful to me, and then I would know which one to move when I wanted to change it because I could see like their relative pitch to each other. That's not actually what happens. It happens initially when you set a sequence, not that I know what any of those notes are, you're just kind of pushing them around the place, but because you use the same sliders in order to change everything else. So if I wanted to change the tempo, I press the track button and then change the tempo slider, but that's the slider of one of my notes, and so it's no longer showing what that note was. Do you see what I mean? Or if you go to channel 2 and you change all the gates about, then go back to channel 1 to do the notes, it no longer reflects the gates, or the gates no longer reflect the notes. I mean, they're not supposed to. It's not designed to be like that. That was just my assumption that I would visually see, have a visual indication as to exactly what was going on. But that's not the case. It's still fabulous, and I still haven't read the manual. So I've intuited my way enough in there to get a heck of a lot out of it. And again, I'm using it all the time. I'm usually using it and I'm clocking the Turing, and at the moment I'm clocking the random rhythm. And it's just having a lovely time, a lovely time. Finishing off then, I have my Pico DSP, which I tend to use just for reverb on a send return. Just to give it a little bit of something. Occasionally I use it as a delay. Which is brilliant. And finally I have my Rosie on the end, which is giving me that send return. It gives me 2 inputs to take stuff and just send it all out through my new audio fuse, which is the audio interface of choice for any discerning young person out there like myself. If you saw my review on the audio fuse, you would have seen, I hope, that I used a big Behringer ADAC converter to route audio from this into the audio fuse for multi-track recording. And that was ace. I'm going to start using that, I hope, once I've worked out how to mount it somewhere where it's not going to be in the way. I would also like to look at using some kind of ADAC interface in the Eurorack itself, like the ES3 from Expert Sleepers, but I think I'm just going to use what I have, simply because I have it. Because the last thing I want to do is buy another module at this point. So have I learned anything with all of this, going through it all? Is it still as amazing as it always has been? Am I still enjoying it? Have I found myself disillusioned, or am I still running with this thing? Well, no, I'm definitely running. I'm in this race. I'm still enjoying this far more than any other musical instrument I've played with in a very, very long time. But there's things I need to do now. I need to start mixing some sources together. That's why I bought this mixer. You know, this one, the Manhattan mixer. Very simple mixer, and I'm going to sit it. It just doesn't quite fit. It doesn't quite fit in here, so I'm going to have to do a little bit of rearranging in order to get that to work. So I just want to mix the drums together. The drums don't need to be going through a VCA. I don't need to apply envelopes to them or anything like that. They just need a little sort of sub-mixer. So I can sub-mix the output of the drums together so it takes up a lot less space in my rack. I also wanted the option to do that with some other things. So I picked up an abstract data little mixer as well, because I wanted something from abstract data because I think they're fabulous. And this is kind of the only thing they do that I really understand. And so that is extraordinarily useful, and that needs to go in there somewhere. I am desperate to plug in the graphic VCO and start working with that as well, which will be my next review after the random rhythm. But what am I going to pull out? I mean, the Demora, I think, has to go. That's going to be the thing that's going to go at the moment. So I'm trying to come up with some kind of awesome nugget of advice to throw at you. And I don't know. My advice, I think, is that sometimes you need to stop and spend time. You need to invest time in small things and learn small things. I mean, if anybody out there buys themselves a big Eurorack rig, straight off the shelf, like the Make Noise one or something of that nature, or even the Erica Synths Pico one, which is small and delicious, but it's gonna be mind-boggling because there is so much going on, potentially going on, so much to learn. And there's still so much that I haven't learned. I'm still treating a lot of this like a synthesizer, like a normal synthesizer. I still haven't gone into complex waveforms. I haven't gone into complex modulation. I'm not really using envelopes to modulate. I'm still exploring those sorts of things. There's a slight worry in the back of my head that I'm going to hit a rut because I tend to sit down, I put that sequence going, and then I just play, and it's seeming perhaps a little bit similar, a little bit samey. Yeah, I suppose there's a potential for that, but I don't know, that hasn't made it any less enjoyable. I talked about a couple of months ago about trying to make March a music making month, and I was going to have this big plan of making music every day. That's just not possible. I don't have a life in which I can do that. However, pushing and focusing towards performance has really helped me focus on what I'm doing. It's really helped me think about how can I bring a bass line out? How can I bring a melody out? How can I bring a counterpoint to that out? How can I fill up that space with either percussion or with some kind of pad or drone? And then how can I change from one thing to another to create kind of a verse chorus structure or some kind of structure or some kind of development over time? Those are things which are really interesting me at this time. And that's really what I want to look at. Going forward, that's what I want to push at. And I am constantly being inspired by videos I see on YouTube of things going on. How did they do that? How is it that all of my stuff is kind of very straightforward, very ordered, particularly with those drums going on? Let's turn that bit off. Most of my stuff is very steady. I haven't worked out how you do that kind of bursts and then something else. I haven't quite gotten there yet. And I want to look into that, to how you make melody into more of a waterfall, how you start messing with that sort of timing. Do you know what I mean? So there is still huge amounts of things for me to learn in terms of composition, in terms of how you fit and integrate all these sounds together to create more of a whole. So although I'm not doing the March music making thing, I've decided, I think, to try something else. I'm going to try to push myself into a bit of live streaming performance. And at the moment, I am poking around in Twitch TV. Now, Twitch is kind of a gaming platform for people to stream their game playing, and that's its main focus. But it's also a very good platform for live streaming. Now, you can live stream on Facebook, sure. You can live stream on YouTube also. But the advantage with Twitch, I think, is that it has a really good chat interaction. It has, I think, the ability to sort of tip the person who's doing it. So, throw money at people. And it also takes your live stream and stuffs it into a YouTube video as well that you can take away with you at the end of the night. And so all those sorts of features makes it quite an interesting platform. And I'm wondering at the moment about broadcasting on there. I mean, if it's something you'd be interested in, then do let me know. Encouragement is always helpful because I'm just trying stuff out. I'm just trying to forge a bit of a path. And if someone says, yeah, that's a great idea, I find that very helpful. So I'm on Twitch TV at the moment under Molten Modular, all one word, and I've created no videos so far, but I will do, because I'm at the very least, going to try it out once I've worked out how you actually physically take camera to computer onto interweb, that sort of thing. I don't know, but I think what I would like to do is to develop it into whenever I'm playing on the Eurorack, whenever I'm having a go, having a jam, whatever, that I will stream it live, and so that you can interact with it, interact with me, say, hey, what happens when you do that? And then I'll do that. That kind of thing. So yeah, that might be awesome. It might not, I don't know. I'm just going to give it a go, and you can pop along there and see what happens. Of course, the whole global thing gets to be difficult. Do I live stream first thing in the morning in the UK, so it's late at night in the States, or do I do it late in the night here, so it's first thing in the morning in the States? Do I care about what people in Australia feel about it? I don't know. I don't really know what the answer to that is. Maybe I'll do a early Saturday morning, late Sunday night. I don't know. But then what happens to my social life? I don't know. So anyway, let's bring this massive ramble to a close then. So that's my rack as it is at the moment. I'm going to adjust it. I'm going to take it apart, put some other things in, and try to incorporate these bits I've got down here which don't have a home at the moment. So that's going to be my next task, I think. So look out soon for my random rhythm review. Following that will be the graphic VCO review. Again, I think, because I think there's so much in here, I don't know whether I'll ever get to the bottom of it, but we'll just have to see. I would at this point like to deeply thank my patrons on patreon.com. Patreon is a great website which allows people to support you financially in the making of your videos and creative content and that kind of thing. And it's absolutely awesome that people are prepared to throw me a couple of quid to enable me to do more of these videos. I can't tell you how helpful it is. At the moment, I've got a small bunch of people who are helping out, and that's fantastic. I mean, if you can see it as buy me a pint or buy me a cup of coffee, or you can see it as a magazine subscription, or even a subscription to, you know, some kind of TV station, that kind of thing. All of those dollars, they are so enormously helpful. First of all, I mean, they encourage me to keep on going, because sometimes this is hard, sometimes it's difficult, and it's often a lot of work. And certainly from my point of view, I'm putting in an awful lot of work, and you're never quite sure whether that's paying off. I mean, you know, altruistically, I'm happy to supply the world of interesting videos, but you also need it to start working for you, because you ultimately have to put food on the table and you have to pay the bills, and you've got to focus on what's ultimately important. And something like Patreon, it really opens up the possibilities that perhaps I could do this more full-time. Perhaps I could invest more time and money into this and the equipment and the bits and pieces and everything that's needed to produce these videos. And that's awesome. So if you value, you know, what I do, if you like what I do, if you enjoy my videos, you've been following the journey, or if you just like giving people stuff, then check it out. Sign up for $1 a month. I mean, that's $12 a year. That's nothing. That's nothing. And that would be enormously helpful to me. Or sign up for more. You can put down as much as you like, or you can just make a one-off tip. You know, go and check it out. It's really very helpful to myself, to other similar creators who are using Patreon. It's such a valuable resource, because honestly, the advertising revenue you get with YouTube is a bit pants, to say the least. So that'll do. I think I've talked myself hoarse and enough, and I've got other things to do, and I will go and do those things. But stay with me. Follow the journey. It's continuing to evolve. I imagine next time you see this rig, the Mother 32 will be in its own box, and I'll have other things going on in here. Check out the Twitch TV thing. Who knows? It might become a bit of a thing. That could be awesome. And in the meantime, go and make some tunes.